Mastering cylinders will supercharge your wheel throwing. It's the key to almost any upright form, but many struggle with uneven walls. So I'm making a simple plant pot and sharing my best tips to help you master the cylinder. I'm using around 1.6 kilos of clay, and I wedge my clay. This will ensure my clay is free from air pockets and homogeneous. With 1.6 kilos of clay, I can make a pot that's 19 by 19 centimeters. I center my clay. So your clay must be centered to end up with an even pot. If the clay is not centered, when you push down into the clay, you're going to have uneven walls, and as you work, the unevenness will become amplified. I'm centering by coning the clay upwards and then pushing the clay back down. Once I feel my clay centered, I flatten the top. The inner plant pot that I'm making this for has specific dimensions, and the base has to be wide enough. I'm ready to push down and open out. There are various ways of doing this, but I push down with a few fingers on my right hand and then bring my fingers across to the heel of my left palm in a kind of scooping motion, creating the floor of the pot and a bit of an undercut. My hands are linked together. And this is an important tip. Link your hands together for stability whenever you can. I compress and smooth the base with a sponge. To form the walls, I'm going to use a knuckle on the outside of the pot. You could equally use your fingertips or a sponge. I'm pushing out from the inside with my fingertips, and I'm pushing back in with my knuckle on my right hand. My hands need to work very evenly together, both in pressure and speed. As I squeeze the clay from the inside and out, the clay is pulled upwards. We want the wall to be slightly thicker at the base. This supports the walls above. I'm keeping the walls angled inward slightly. This helps control the cylinder, and I can bring the walls up higher. I compress the rim every time I come up. Coming up again, I think about the rotations and how my hands are moving. If I come up too quickly, I'll create an uneven swirl and parts of the wall will be thinner. So obviously my hands aren't actually touching here, but they do feel connected through the clay. So now that I have the height, I'm ready to shape. I always make the height first and then shape my pot. This is a really gentle curve. And I trim away some of the clay at the base. This makes the job of trimming a little easier and makes the pot a little more even in thickness for drying. I smooth the pot with my flexible rib. I don't mind the throwing lines, but I want a smooth surface to decorate. And I use a chamois to smooth the rim of the pot through and set aside to dry. I'm going to fast forward through another pot and recap those points. Make sure clay is the right consistency and homogeneous. Make sure clay is properly centered. Don't start making your pot until the clay is truly centered. Keep your arms steady by bracing at your hip, against your torso, or against your thighs. Find the center of the clay to push down and then open out evenly. Link your hands together whenever you can. Bring your hands up slowly together, making sure you don't create large swirls. Release your hands gently from the clay, or you might knock your pot or clay off center. Get the height of your pot right before shaping. And don't be afraid to occasionally cut through a pot as you progress. You'll be able to see how even your walls are and where you might be going wrong. So my first pot is leather hard and I'm ready to trim. You can use lugs of clay, but I've made a little chuck. I've thrown a pad of clay that fits the inner rim of my pot. Your pot must be even for this to work. Trimming this shape is not complicated. I simply trim across the base and then a little around the outer rim. And I smooth the trim surface with my flexible rib. I then dry my pot and bisque fire. So my pot's bisque fired and I'm ready to glaze, and the first thing I do is glaze the inside. I'm using a clear liner glaze. I'm still happy making spots, so I'm going to decorate with resist spots. This time I'll use glaze over the resist so the spots will remain raw. I'm using a latex and sponges to make the spots. You could also use cold wax. It's the same principle, but they might work a little differently. So check the manufacturer's recommendations. Once the latex is dry, I brush my pot with a green glaze. Brush-on glazes are specifically formulated for brushing. They often take a little longer to dry and may require a number of coats. So I've added a couple of coats of glaze and it's dry, so I can remove the latex spots. It's a little fiddly, but oddly satisfying. And then I gently clean up any extra bits of glaze. And I fire my pot. So my pot's finished and I think I got the sizing about right. The pot fits as intended. Making simple shapes like this is good practice. And plant pots are useful and practical. For more plant pot action, check out my self-watering planter project. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy potting.